Sports are more than just a competition and a trophy. Sports are a portal for everyday people to pursue their wildest dreams on some of the world's largest stages. My name is Riley Sager, and I'll be taking you along with me as I hear from SBC and VSL alumni who pursued a career in the business of sports. In this series, I will sit down with guests to discuss strategies for entering the sports world and what you can do to differentiate yourself in the industry. From playing to coaching to broadcasting, the common denominator for any job in sports is the ability to push oneself to become a master at their craft while connecting with others who share that same passion to be great. Let's get into it. Today, we're thrilled to welcome Devin Dismang, VSL alum and the current Director of Digital and Content at X Games. With a deep background in creative strategy and digital marketing, Devin has made a significant impact across major sports and entertainment platforms, from consulting with renowned brands like Netflix and Nike to leading social and digital initiatives for complex events like the X Games. We're excited to dive into his journey, learn about his innovative approach to content creation, and get his insights on the future of digital strategy in sports media. Tune in for our engaging conversation. Devin, welcome to SBC Audio Experience. I'm super excited for this episode. Let's get into it.
Let's do it.
So you're currently working as the X Games Director of Digital Content, but your journey in sports media started a long time ago when you were only 16. So what was that initial introduction into sports and sports media and creating your own content?
Yeah, I mean, starting in sports when I was 16, I worked for Chicago Bears. I'm born and raised here in Illinois, so I lived in the suburb of Chicago, where the Bears actually had their training camp. So they did this thing where they would partner with local kids to be interns and just like summer help for the training camp. And from that, I kind of turned into like, I want to learn the business angle for it. And there was a guy that I worked with, I'm really close with him now, Matt Black. He was like, hey, this is kind of the career side of the sports side that you don't see, right? We watch football on Sundays and kind of call it a day. And as somebody who was playing football, I was like, I didn't realize there's another path outside of being part of the 55-man roster that you could do this with. So I went from there, went to college, and really learned like the sports management realm and interned and worked with a lot of teams here in the Chicagoland area. So I was working with Chicago Fire FC, the soccer team, the Chicago Sky, actually. It was like year 2 of them. And like doing that, I remember I was on the street team. What's crazy to say this now, I was on the street team, like hawking tickets for people to just go see their games. And like now they sell that arena out, especially in this last season. Also still doing some of the Bears and then just helping out, ironically, some of the mascots in the city. So like Southpaw for the White Sox and something. I know was like a mascot assistant where I would go around, essentially take the mascot to like parades and like stuff like that. That it was much different than the content world is, because at that point content was just like TV, games, and then broadcast shows. Like you really didn't have this. You really didn't have social media. You didn't really have much of that. And that's crazy to say because that was only, 15, 20 years ago. So that's why I started into this whole realm. Yeah.
You're exposed to it obviously at an early age, but what was that decision like to say, okay, this is what I want my career to be?
The decision is twofold. The decision was, one, I was not blessed enough to be over like 6'3" and go to the league and do that stuff anyway. So I still just wanted to work in sports. So a lot of that was, I was like, all right, well, what do I want to do? And while I was doing the part-time work with teams, one of the things I loved doing was game presentation. So I've always been down as obviously a former athlete. You love to entertain, right? The goal is you go out there, you're having a great game. People are happy with the game, and you're just entertaining the masses. And that was one thing I've always wanted to do, is entertain the masses. So at the time, game presentation was kind of like that angle to do so. So from that, I ended up working with the Falcons to do their game presentation in 2012, to where I was like writing scripts, picking anthem singers, what's the halftime going to look like, working with the partnerships team to, ensure a Verizon partnership with Ludacris at off time would go really well. And stuff like that's where you're now looking at the full business through entertainment of sport, because at the end of the day, it is an entertainment industry. So that was really like the decision to get into this, was that at the end of the day, like I wanted to make people enjoy why they were buying tickets, why they're watching on TV or whatever it may be. And that even stemmed into why I ended up eventually transitioning to the full-on content side, was because, it started to build outside of the game a lot more than just seeing it in the ring or seeing it on TV.
What were some skills that you had going into it that you felt confident in? And then what were some things that you're like, oh my gosh, like I've never done this before, and you just kind of had to go with the flow?
A lot of it is stuff that you learn on the fly. Like when I got the role with the Falcons, I had never written a script before. I never booked a anthem singer. I've never even talked to like an agent of a music artist. You know what I mean? Like it's these certain things, but all I knew, I was like, A, I know how to work hard. B, I know I wasn't afraid to fail trying doing it and like learning on the job. Because I think a lot of things now, I know with staff that I work with, that on my team or other places, like everyone wants the answers kind of like on a paper so they don't trip and fail. But I see you learn the most doing those. And then just the overall like wanting to learn. Like a lot of it was, I knew people above me, and that just might be just 21-year-old being naive and all that kind of stuff. But like I knew the people above me knew more than I did. So if I went into this room and I was the smartest person in this room, I did not want to be in that room at 21. Like at all. Hey, this is bad if I am that. So I was always talking with my boss, someone else. I wasn't afraid. This is like the infancy, I feel like, of in LinkedIn, but I was like infancy of like reaching out to people at other teams and saying like, hey, I do this for this. Would love to talk to you about doing this. And then it was anything from minor league baseball to other NFL teams to, I talked to a couple of people in like Europe at the time, and I was like, hey, how are you guys thinking about this? So I just wasn't afraid to ask for help. And a lot of those skills and a lot of those basic just traits that I had helped me evolve anything from being able to direct a media day for a NFL team to learning how to shoot video for the first time at 26, and like all these things that kind of, hell, even doing, running the scores table at Summer League. So it's like these types of things that like I didn't have a lot of that experience early enough to where it was like, hey, do I feel comfortable just applying for this thing or trying this thing? Like, I kind of have some of the skills, but I'm have to learn a lot on the job. And one of the things I heard years ago, which I still say to this day, because now, like I said, I'm like the unk of the group at this point, to where I tell people like, listen, if it's going to be the wrong answer, then make it the right answer. Because even if you're doing it wrong according to someone, like still do it further enough to where like, all right, well, I know that's the wrong way, but it's still going to look right to everyone else. And then the next time I can fix it. To where a lot of people just kind of like retreat as soon as they know it's wrong, to where I'm like, hey, it's too late. You're past the point of no return. Let's keep pushing forward, get through it, reevaluate next time. So I think those all help me build whatever skill I really needed, honestly, outside of it.
Yeah, especially in production, when you're on the behind the scenes, you may see 12 things that just went wrong. But as long as, the fans are having a good time, like you said earlier, entertaining the masses, then you just got to go with it.
You have to. I mean, there's so much, especially in game entertainment, before I even got into content, like game entertainment, so much can go wrong. A pixel can go out on the video board. Audio can sound bad on the right side of the stadium, but sound awesome on the left side. Your halftime act could be lost in an Uber. Like whatever you can think of, I've heard of. And there you just have to roll with it and try to fix it. We've went in where we're like, hey, we're out of t-shirts and t-shirt toss. And you're just tossing like whatever you have in the back. Like it's anything you can come up with. You have to just be flexible, because I think, especially as we go into this next wave of sports, the idea of being flexible is going to be a very big deal. We're all obviously all coming out of a 5-year span of the pandemic and being at home, and now that teams are very much fully operational, it's getting back to the side of like, all right, can you do one or more two things that you may have not been able to do? And I think we're in a space to where the folks who were maybe willing to do that back in the day are now, myself, like we're older, so next generation's coming up, and they're trying to learn that without really getting the same experience I got in Atlanta at 21, because they were kind of stuck in the houses and just learned how to do it via email or whatever it might be. So on my side, I think it's very important for everyone just to get reps and like face those fears, because honestly, at the end of the day, that's the only way you're going to be able to learn and grow.
Have you ever had to fill in for the national anthem?
Have I ever had to fill for the national anthem?
Yeah.
Absolutely not. But absolutely not. But they do say I'm a young Maxwell these days. But I will say one thing I had the one thing I had happen to me was, so I was still in Atlanta. I was 21, and they were like, "All right, you gotta read the PA announcements over the speakers, right?" And I had never done that anywhere. Like I had never been on a microphone. I never nothing. And it was me, the Georgia Dome, RIP, the Georgia Dome, and like 3 people. There wasn't a lot. There was no one else in the building. Maybe janitors who were like cleaning up, ready for the game. And I was so nervous. I was sitting there like, I was reading the paper. And they're like, "All right, Devin, read this." And I was like, "So this is what the t-shirt talks going to be." And my boss is next week starts dying laughing. He's like, "What's wrong with you?" I'm like, "Dude, I'm so nervous." Like it was the most nervous I'd ever been. That was the closest I ever got to singing the national anthem. Now,
Okay.
yeah, no shot.
You mentioned working with the Falcons, but you've also worked with Golden State Warriors, and also Oklahoma City Thunder. What would you say is the biggest difference between NFL and NBA and managing and directing content from those two perspectives?
I was gonna give a very non-PC answer, but I would say the biggest difference is you have more opportunities and leeway to mess up in the NBA than you do in the NFL, right? NBA has, what is it? It's 41 home games, and then NFL maybe has 8, right? That's a vast different games. That's a vast different season. So you only have a very tight window to not mess up. And that's why I remember one time when I was in Atlanta, like, "Hey man, you have 8 opportunities to get this right." And really, if you can't get it right for 8 weeks, like they're always going to remember the 1 week you messed up. So like even when the preseason's the preseason for the players, it was also preseason for us as staff, because we had to get out all the kinks. We had to make sure all the things were going right. We had to make sure, like, that was very much stress testing everything, because once you got to those 8 games, like every week was like, you have to get this right. So we're in the NBA. It's like, you know what? Our video kind of messed up in the second quarter. It's fine. Let's do it. Let's do it tomorrow. We'll hear about it, and then we'll do it tomorrow. Like, we already know we're going to hear about it. Unless it's the one time we have to hit on that thing, then that's when we get it. But it's like, hey, this is a season-long thing. Oh, like, we know there's just a little bit more breathing room flexibility. The only exception is when it gets to playoffs, and that's all the same pressure. Because then it goes from like, 41 to 4, right? So, or at max 4. So that's the biggest difference, I think, is a lot of people don't realize how much you have to get right quickly with the NFL. That's why people call it the not for long league half the time. Because if you have very limited time to really like mess with things, versus the NBA, to like, hey, you can experiment a little bit. And that is kind of my vast experience in it, at least.
How did your 2 experiences with those leagues help you transition to X Games?
Those 2 helped me out because I learned early on, like, what it's like to work, not only just with athletes, but work with 2 different leagues that have different perspectives, different mindsets. And coming into X Games, which is completely different, right? Like, I've worked for all your traditional sports, basketball, a little bit of baseball, a little bit, football, we already talked about. So we're coming into action sports, to where I tell people straight up, I have never snowboarded. I have never skied. I've never, like, my first time to a ski resort was last year for X Games. And I walked into this thing and I was like, holy crap, this thing is massive. Like, people do this all the time. So it was, but for me, the one thing at the base level is the same. It's, how am I making the sport pop culturally relevant? And then what am I doing to tie the athletes naturally to what's happening in the day-to-day media, how to highlight their achievements, and making them characters with helmets off. That's one of the big things the NFL does, is those guys are wearing full shoulder pads, helmet. Like, you don't really see their faces most of the time. But when you see them on TV, the first thing you see of them is them with a helmet off. Slow-mo camera shot on them walking in with their family. Anything that just establishes their person first versus the player. NBA, same thing, right? You don't have the helmet off there, but at the same point, it's the same of like, you don't know all 15 players. So you need to know something about them to then fall in love with them. So coming into the X Games standpoint, to where transparently, I came in knowing 3 people that are still active. And when I come in, there's 120 athletes across the world. Many of them are participating in the Olympics. Many of them are participating in some of these bigger events. And that is when they really shine. To when X Games is, a much more of a smaller thing on their day-to-day, their regimen. How are we amplifying them to then amplify us? Because that's the only way you're going to do it. The athlete is the direct pathway to the fan. So if you're going to care about the X Games and the X Games League and anything like that, you have to care about the athlete first. There is no way around that. And I learned that strictly through the NBA, and I learned that strictly through the NFL. Because, yeah, you can be a Falcons fan or whatever it may be, but if you don't care about, at the time, Tony Gonzalez, you can give you don't care about how good they're going. If you, are a basketball fan and you don't care about Steph Curry, like, you don't really care about the Warriors as a team. So it's the same logic, but it's just applied differently. And that's where a lot of my stuff has come from, honestly, with this new role and stuff that I've been doing here over the last year.
You brought up the Olympics, and I think there's this interesting, I don't know if it's paradox, but when it's not time for the Olympics, it seems that the leagues with teams are the most popular, NFL, NBA. But then when it's the Olympics, it's the individual sports that everybody is watching, gymnastics, swimming, that kind of thing. So what are your thoughts on that? I mean, you're covering X Games, you're trying to tell the stories of these athletes, maybe they have a following, maybe they don't. How do you go about that?
Well, it's interesting because that's one of the things I've been trying to solve some of in here, transparently, is that you're right. Like, when it comes to those individual sports, like, it's hard to be a part of those individualities. But you mentioned that when the Olympics come, everyone cares about those individuals. But I would then caveat and say, technically, they only care about the teams that's there, but the teams now are nations, right? Like, I'm wearing a Team USA sweatshirt right now. So people are like, I'm watching Simone Biles on Team USA. No disrespect to Simone Biles because she's a GOAT. No one that I have seen has gone to, like, she has her own tour that goes around the country. That's awesome. If you can go to it, check it out. But they does not get the same fandom as Simone Biles in the Olympics. And that is kind of the issue that we're dealing with, of like, all right, how are you taking the momentum from the Olympics and then turning that fandom into, I'm selling out the United Center to come see this gymnastics tour? Because once you're there, it's the same thing I tell everyone next game. So once you're there, you're going to have the time of your life. You just have to get there. And it's hard to convince someone, like, all right, I know what I'm going to get and experience at a basketball game. I've seen it. I've done it. It's easy. Ball goes in the hoop. Who does it the most wins. It's that simple. But the educational standpoint is, and how many Olympics come across to where you could probably talk to 10 people in a bar and they're going to tell you, I know exactly how Simone Biles got that point on the beam because I'm a gymnastics expert. No, you're not. You just watched it every 4 years and you're just like all of us who think we are at the time, right? Mm-hmm. One of the big things with X Games, and we talk about this, is our sports are hard to educate quickly on to the casual fan, because if you watch a skateboarding, which is the Olympics, you watch a skateboarder do a trick, like, it's a 10 out of 10. You're like, how? Because it looked like the other 10 tricks I've seen, unless you know the sport.
Yeah.
The one thing that helps us is when we see someone on, like, a BMX bike or a motorbike or whatever it might be, and I can see a physical bike flipping and turning and stuff like that, and that registers in my brain because I ride a bike. I've ridden a bike, never ridden a skateboard in my life. So as soon as you're like, I can at least tie, like, damn, that's really hard because I've ridden a bike like that when I was 15. That's got to be super difficult. So our situation, and whether it's individual sports or access sports, whatever it is like, especially the non-team sports, is how are we then educating the masses that then care about the teams? One of the things with X Games, and this is public now, so we'll talk about it, is we are going from the X Games traditional model, which is like the 10 people of us can line up together and do a skateboarding event and the top 3 win a medal, which is still a part of it. But we're going to a league model, which is now going to have, like, teams similar to, like, how F1 does it, where it's, the Red Bull racing team. Like, it'll be a similar situation with that. When now these athletes are going to have a team towards, like, one skateboarder, one snowboarder, one skier, etc. And they have, like, salaries and 401ks and stuff like that, stuff that they've never had before. And then from that, they're also, now you're getting fans of the team. That's why we're talking about it as, like, the F1 model, because transparently, no one really cared about, Red Bull Racing 8 years ago, until one, the documentary jobs, which is a big part of that, right? So we go back to the content. Content really fueled then how a whole league was. And then because of that, now we're like, all right, I love Red Bull Racing because they're dogs on the track. But I also care about how much of Max Verstappen is a baller, and he's like the Kobe Bryant of F1 because all he cares about is racing and nothing else. Like, it's something that ties it back to how I'm going to naturally understand it. And now that is one of the biggest sports, obviously, in the world. Already was, but now it's one of the biggest sports that's made it to the States, which is one of the hardest markets to get into. So at the same point, we're doing the same thing to expand X Games in that same realm to where, like, all right, we're going to build these teams, build these stories. You're going to care about the team. You're going to care about the athlete, but then at the end of the day, you're going to care about the sport. So it's a really interesting problem that we're obviously attacking and trying to get ahead of. But the Olympics is very proof of that. Is once you build that team model, because at the end of the day, people want to care about a group of individuals and like a team achievement versus just like, I'm the best XYZ in a row, or XYZ in the world. Because at that point, you can still be Usain Bolt and you're the fastest man in the world, but you're still the fastest man in the world on Team Jamaica. And Team Jamaica is still going to have a massive amount of fans. So it's just trying to figure out that beautiful web of connections that gets someone to care about what you're doing. And that's a big part of it.
How do you manage that challenge of not only trying to lure people in to be a fan of the league, but like, the exposure of it, that's the first step. Like you said, once they're there, they're going to stay. But getting them through the door is the hard part.
And it goes back to a storytelling, right? It goes back to immediately like, what is the story of the league? What do you want people to connect to, for one? Two, I've already kind of loosely spoken about this, but the amplification of the athlete in media, on social, on digital, on TV, their branding, whatever it may be. And then three, it's just a general investment into the sport, right? Like, there's a lot of sports coming out or that are redoing their thing to just kind of feel like a startup company and make it, what works this year may not work next year type of vibe. But it all starts with the first two things. Like, if you can't tell the story of the league through the athletes and gain those fans, it's great. Because to your point, there's not a lot of, like, I know Lakers fans, but I could tell you right now, I know more LeBron fans. I know Lakers fans. So, like, LeBron could go play for the Greece team for his last 2 years if he wanted to, and all of a sudden it's the biggest team in the world because LeBron James is there. It's the same thing that happened in Cleveland. I remember this when I was at Golden State. When LeBron was in Cleveland, Cleveland was like number one or number two at some point on like one of the social medias. Like, they had like the largest following. And people were like, why in the world is and everyone's like, the answer is literally obvious. Like, no disrespect to the Cavs, that sound like Joe Camoa, but like, not enough people. There's no way a lot of people are Cavs fans. They're LeBron fans. So as soon as he dipped, I remember that stat from me of like watching their number drop because they then went to wherever he went. Right. So it's that mindset of like, all right, well, but he took control of his storytelling. He controlled his narrative. And obviously being the best player in the world helped out a ton. You still would be on a team. So there's still a little bit of that give and pull to make it happen. So with the action sports world, we have a lot of stars, young and old, transparently, but like, we have a young star. Her name is Eileen Gu. She's a skier, goes to Stanford, right now, 20 years old, or just turned 21, one of two, but she's also a model. She's in Vogue. She's sponsored by Porsche. She is also one of the most intelligent individuals I've ever met. She's studying, I believe, quantum physics at Stanford, and is currently at Oxford, all while doing this, all while being one of the best skiers in the world. Like, she just was in the Olympics, and won gold. She just won X Games last year with us, and is looking to come back to X Games in 2025. And she's doing all of this as a 2021-year-old right now, and is one of the most polarizing people. Like, I've been around a ton of athletes. She's probably one of the most chill, but like hardest working athletes I've ever seen. And the fact that I tell her and like other people, like, she's one of the folks who could be one of the largest names in the world and already is in the right places. But here in the States, not just yet, because not too many people are like, yo, I'm locked in on skiing right now. Now, when 2026 rolls around, when we know the Olympics are coming up,
Right.
our goal from the X Games standpoint is how am I amplifying Eileen's name now in January throughout the year of 2025, potentially another X Games in right before or close enough to the Olympics, and then going into the Olympics. What is my role to help do that? Because then when she's like, oh, I'm here, the first thing, and one of the things she'll say is like, X Games helped take care of me for the last year and a half till we get to this point. She's already doing the hard work, right? Like, again, I for sure can't teach her how to ski. I damn sure can't teach her quantum physics. But what I can do is amplify her in these other spaces to where she's not able to do that because she's so concentrated on these things, and teach her and some of our athletes like how to be good on social, opportunities with, going to NBA games. Right? We did this with a snowboarder who went to one of the Celtics finals games. He's a diehard Celtics fan, but action sports folks in basketball don't do that. And then I turned around and I had Jimmy Butler in Ventura just on a whim for 2 days, and he had a blast. So it's like tying in us into, again, pop culture, and tying these athletes in particular into pop culture, where you're like, all right, how come I'm seeing so-and-so here, and how come so-and-so is? Because we are infiltrating these spaces to where action sports at one point became so niche and so protected that it was like, we don't want other people to mess with us, and we're not going to mess with other people. And I'm like, well, no disrespect, that's why you're not growing, because you're too afraid to be in these spaces because you're like overthinking it in the most transparent and politically correct possible way to say it. Like, that is what we're trying to do with this league and this team and what we're having to do, because that's the only way to make it grow.
So what is the balance between you guys at X Games trying to tell the athlete story versus just giving them the platform to tell their own story? Because, now with social media, any athlete can say anything. They get to create their own identity. So where's the balance between you helping out with that and then you just amplifying it?
Yeah, I think the balance is we never want to take away from what an athlete's already doing. Like, the goal is, if they're like, hey, I'm doing a YouTube series, can X Games support? Sure. What we'll do is, repost a clip from it, put it on our feed, then put it on maybe our IG story with the link that goes straight to the YouTube. It has nothing even to do with us, but it's enough to where like that one step is going to put it in front of 4.8, 4.7 million followers on Instagram. And then they're like, oh, damn, I didn't know so-and-so had this. When on the other hand, it's like, we can do several things. One, we did this with Deshaun Jordan, who's a skateboarder out of, I think it's in LA actually. But we brought in Meta for the first time, and Threads. They have a Threads throwing activation. And we asked all the athletes that sat on there, we're like, hey, what is your dream partner? Like, what is your dream sponsor? And his answer is hilarious. It was Minute Maid, because I love juice. How he said it, word for word, bar for bar. I immediately clipped it. Somebody sent him a clip. I clipped it, sent it to his agent, sent it to somebody at Minute Maid, and we were like, please make this happen. Because it's so organic to where like this has happened, and the story is that point. I'm like, all right, I don't have a Minute Maid partnership for X Games, but if we can help facilitate and build one through the X Games channel, because we posted this and now people are like, yo, Minute Maid, holla at your boy, you got to do this, da, da, da. Now they're more obligated because it's organic, and we help build that. So that's the difference of like amplification versus just like, we're just going to make content with you, tiny mic it, here's your highlights, whatever it is. Because again, those things that we do, it may be few and far between, but they're going to be way more impactful than just like, hey man, here's your gold medal winning run on social. Sure, it got 1 million views, but if I can get you an additional $10,000 in your pocket, you're going to care more about that. Or you're going to care more about like how it then help grow your brand. Or we have guys and gals who do multiple things. We have somebody who sings. We have a person who, the athletes who want to learn media. You see it right now a lot in the NFL, to where a lot of folks are like, hey, while I'm in the league, I want to learn how to be a TV host or a podcast host or whatever it is. And they're asking people to help them out there. We're starting to do that same thing, because as the next wave of athletes come in, they're younger, right? We're also a very unique property where our athletes can be X Games athletes at like 10 years old. You know what I mean? I think we just had a 9-year-old girl win an X Games medal. I got to make sure I'm fact checking here. Mia Kretzer, she a baller on the vert ramp. We just had a kid from Japan, 10 years old, do 3 900s in front of Tony Hawk during a red alert event with Tony's team. And it was a 10-year-old Japanese kid, and then he came to X Games and had a ball and participate. Right at 10 years old, I'm just trying to see what type of cartoons was going on with Fruity Pebbles at the time. Like, so for them to do this, at ton, and like even somebody even better, Arissa True, I talk about her all the time. She's I would say 14 or 15 years old, women's skateboarder out of Australia. She has been on the craziest tear I've ever seen of many professional athletes. She won X Games gold in Ventura this past year, went to the Olympics, won gold for the Australia, then met us in Japan like a month later, won X Games gold there. And then she's been to like 6 events in between and has won every single one of those sets.
Wow.
As a 14-year-old kid. Again, 14-year-old kid, I'm like, yo, I got football practice at 3 o'clock, mom. Like so it's a whole different energy with this younger crew of athletes coming in because they are younger and they are stronger than the vets. So the vets are like, all right, what are we doing now? Either I've made my money or what's the next step? Because transparently, like the NFL and the MLB, these guys and gals don't make as much money, right? It's a very underrated sport to where you're not making a lot. And they're also chasing purses, right? Like if they're going to participate in a skateboarding event in Japan, but it takes them $2,500 to fly there, get accommodations, whatever it might be, if it's not sponsored. And then the prize purse is $5,000 and maybe they win it, then they're only getting half their money back.
Yeah.
So it's that kind of life to where like we're trying to help amplify that way. That's where like the league model comes in. But also if we're able to facilitate brand deals, grow their platforms, grow them as professionals outside of their respective sports, now they're set up for success. And all I really need them to concentrate on is performing on the courses. Because that's the one thing I can't do.
Your job is to tell their story. When you have a 10-year-old, there's not that much, they don't have 10 years of career for you to go off of.
No. And also, like, and by means, no disrespect to the athletes because they're all great. I'm a 34-year-old man. I don't really care about what a 10-year-old is doing outside of the crazy stuff I just seen, right? Like, there's I'm blanking on his name, but there was the Olympic sprinter this past Olympics, like 16-year-old kid, I think out of the DMV area. And literally everything he does, right? He's like, I'm wearing my gold medal to my like homeroom class and stuff like that. I'm like, dude, you're the coolest 60-year-old I've ever seen in my life. But like, you're going to then tell me you want to play Fortnite later. Like, it's cool, but like, that's a certain audience that's not for me. It's for that next generation. Yeah. So how am I then telling the story of a 9, 10, 11, 12, 13-year-old on social or on digital that 9, 10, 11, 12, 13-year-olds can care about because that's who I need to grow with the brand, not the 29-year-old who is transitioning to a new career or the, 25-year-old. Like I need to hit this audience because then they're going to become that. So that's the interesting phase of this because basketball is great because you can learn something from a 20-year-old who's in the league, but you're not going to listen to too many high school kids unless they have some really big name or affiliation tied to them.
What about an athlete story are you looking for that's original? I mean, because X Games is not as widely covered as other leagues, you kind of have the freedom to be original. It's not as dense in terms of content, but what do you look for?
When I'm going through any athlete story, is trying to figure out what is going to be that line of connection. So, looking at, I already kind of talked about Eileen, so I'm trying to think of someone different. I'm looking at Zeb Powell, who is one of our only, and this is a storyline, he's, if not our only, one of our only Black professional snowboarding athletes. That right there is a storyline in itself. How come there's not, in a predominantly white field, this kid is the best. First and foremost, people fear him when he goes on to the courses. How do we talk about that? 2, he's one of the most nonchalant guys while also being one of the top competitors you talk to every single year. So how is his attitude also reflected into his performance and just off the courses? Number 3, he's adopted. So like he grew up in North Carolina, in a predominantly white household actually, and then learned how to snowboard from that to then go into this field. So how is that he grew up in a very like melting pot household where he had a lot of brothers and sisters who were adopted. Like, how did that help his experience into this? And then when we're celebrating things like Black History Month, or we're trying to talk about our just general diversity of stories, like this is one of those things that we can talk to, because a lot of people want to go naturally to like the skate park and this kid and he's up and coming, and people watched Disney Channel original movies and think it's the same story when it's not. It's usually like something like Zeb's story, to where there's several different caveats on how he learned it, or to the Eileen again, who is doing 3 things at once, to the Chloe Kim's, who's still one of the best snowboarders in the world, but also owns a media company, also is sponsored by all these brands and things like that. But she's still under 25. But at the same point, she's talking about, similar to Simone, like the importance of mental health and things that they're interested in. So a lot of it's getting to know the athlete's background story first, and then personally, I like to talk with them, even for like 10 minutes. Just be like, let me try to get something from that conversation. And from that, I learned Zeb Powell was a fan of Shedeur Sanders in Colorado football and what they're doing. So Shedeur is like, yo, I love Zeb because I'm learning on a snowboard right now. So I said, hey, DM Shedeur, do you want to come to X Games Aspen? That dude was there 2 weeks later. And I had him and Zeb snowboarding together, and they learned about each other's careers and life and stuff like that, and just bringing those 2 things together, because again, the storyline's going to make sense when I get only just one hook. And out of that one thing, it was like, okay, Zeb is a fan of this. That's how Zeb, I talked about the Celtics earlier, he was the athlete. Like, Zeb is a huge fan of the Celtics. And like, he's really tight with Jaylen Brown and like all these guys. And we're like, I had no idea about that. So now how are we now tying that story in a little bit more when it's even outside of the X Games realm? Like, how are we utilizing the athletes and their stories to not only, again, amplify theirs, but like amplify our athletes in spaces you don't expect them to be. I always tell even myself, like, we should be commenting in places you shouldn't expect us to be, right? Like, I don't know if you're a big person on TikTok, but you'll go on there and see like a girl talking about like her ramen noodles are trash. And then I'm looking at Sarah V's TikTok like, oh, I hate when that happens in my ramen noodles. And you're like, yo, what are you doing here? Right? And then you just see like Cheez-Its is in there. You're like, yo, you should add this next. Like, you're like, why are these random brand? Like, that's what I said. Like, X Games has to do that. So I tell them all the time, like, if you ever see X Games in like, I don't know, Alice Cooper's podcast club, like, yeah, girl, top, like whatever it might be, like, do it. Like, just like do it, because we have to be in these spaces and be much more collaborative. And from an athlete storyline, that's what it has to be. It has to be collaborative as the world, because at the end of the day, if it's just like, yeah, no, I joke because Katie's my guy, but Katie's Twitter handles like, I do be and chill. Like, if that's all they're going to do with our athletes, like, they're not going to be anywhere really. And the goal is like, even if it's something like that, like, there's still something about you someone's going to care about. We just have to figure it out. And I always will find like, what's that interesting thing, even when they think it's not. That's the funniest part.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, I'm a vegan. And I'm like, oh, I can get you in the vegan community tomorrow. They're like, dude, it's just the food I eat. I go, yeah, but that's like niche community that people are going to care about a professional snowboarder who is vegan. They may not care about me or someone else, or, an accountant being vegan, but they care about you because you're top of your class, top of your sport. Mm-hmm. So how are we tying into that?
Yeah, there's a certain power that comes with being an outsider, because if you're someone, let's say you've grown up around this culture, the ins and outs, you may overlook things. Like you just said, being vegan, you might, if you're the athlete, you'd be like, no, like, I'm used to that, that's nothing special. But then when you come in from this outside perspective, you're like, no, this isn't normal. Like, this is helping you get to where you are. You get to see this kind of big picture view on it.
100%. Because people, like, it's the same logic people have on like YouTube vloggers and things like. That's how I look at it, is where people are like, day in my life of my 9 to 5 accounting job. I just keep using that because I just saw one of these videos today, and it's someone like, here's my commute, unplug my Tesla, get into the car, go to Starbucks, go into the elevator, go to my sick, and that thing has 2 million views. So I'm like, people care. Like, you may think your life is super mundane and boring, like, people care. So like, if that's going to get 2 million views, imagine you're doing that and you're the best skateboarder in the world or the best snowboarder in the world. And literally when you put it like that, people are like, damn, you're right. Like, that's really true. So
How would you describe the power of TikTok? I know it's just one platform of social media, but what about it is so different?
the power of TikTok is insane. As someone, my biggest regret, I tell people all the time, I have two actually. One, I didn't start TikTok early enough, both professionally and personally. And the other one is I didn't start YouTube when it was popping. But like TikTok as a whole is one of the most powerful platforms on this planet right now because you can get anywhere with just the right 3 seconds of the video. Anywhere. I just watched an entire beef this past weekend with these 2-3 like NFL content creators for like the Eagles and the Lions because one video came up and I was so intrigued by this guy talking smack to this other person that I went to find the other video, exited the app, went to bed, woke up, and I got the entire beef on my feed the next day. And I don't follow either account. Like that's the most powerful thing is like that platform has changed how content is absorbed so much in the last 4 years. Again, you could throw it to the pandemic, throw it to whatever you want to, but like YouTube has shorts now. Instagram Reels was now a whole thing. Even, I forgot this LinkedIn has short videos now. Where I'm like, the last thing I want to hit on LinkedIn is a short video. You know what I mean? Like it's that to where TikTok has evolved other brands because of how powerful it's been. Yeah. And it is one of the strongest platforms if you know how to utilize it correctly. I know it's going through its own changes. Now it's kind of like, oh, let's tailor it up from like under 60 seconds to like just over 60. So it can be a long form video. And like now they're like, oh, we're testing out 10-minute videos or whatever it might be. I'm like, brother, if I'm on TikTok for 10 minutes, I'm just going to go to YouTube. So yeah, it's a very interesting how things change, but always stay the same is the line. But like they have been very disruptive to just the social landscape. I think also too, the other thing they've been very disruptive on is, I don't want to say the quality of content. That's not the case, but like the production value of content, I should say, to where it doesn't have to be, I need a red camera and sit down mic. And I'm literally filming this on a webcam and a spotlight. You can really see it in the window. Like that is what people are used to. And they'll just get on here and say like, okay, the Chicago Bears that just lost their 4th straight game, da, da, da. And it just looks like this with a couple graphics flying in the back and 2 million views. Or it's, a girl in the car with the greatest video in the world saying like, she's putting makeup on and getting ready for a day. She's like, let me tell you about this date I had, and it's 4 minutes long. And we're sitting there like, damn, you went on the worst date of all time. Like it is one of those things that we have craved a lot of different types of human connection, whether it is from informative to something of that nature where it's like, damn, it feels like a girlfriend of mine just telling me a story that like she would just tell me on the phone, or we go out to dinner to where now a lot of us were, the world has changed so much so where sometimes it's just hard to do those things. I don't know how you are as an individual, but for me, sometimes there's days where I'm like, I got to do my monthly, like show up in real life as a friend person thing. Because like, if I don't, my friends might cancel me. I might not see them for a long time. So, because if I sit down a long time, I like to be in my house and my whole body because I travel so much for work. So by the time I'm home, my battery is cooked. To where like now if my friends are like, yo, I posted a vlog of me going to Thailand. I'm like, wake me. I want to see it. Show me what you did. I got 10 minutes to catch up on your life. Let's do it. So it's interesting how that has not only just affected real life, but then just the digital landscape for businesses and work. It's changed people's careers, right? There's a story of a woman who was like a Walmart greeter in Morris, Illinois, actually. And like, she now made enough money off TikTok to where she left that job. And like, I don't know what she's doing, but like, she made enough. And I asked people, I had a kid, oh my gosh, so you didn't end this part of it, but like, I had a kid send me a resume for a job I was hiring. And literally it was like TikTok creator was on his resume, or like influencer, TikTok creator. And it was like, I have amassed 2 million followers under this handle, 13 million views, content come out this time. And I talk to those people more so than your traditional, like I went to school and done this, because they do it every day. Like they do it every day. Now, if I'm looking for a host, then cool. But if I'm looking for someone who understands the platform, who can edit quickly, who can know best times and worst times to post, who can manipulate footage properly. I think a great example of this is like, I don't know if you follow the Los Angeles Chargers on there, and shout out to my girl Megan, who runs that whole team. But they do a great job of like turning around content quickly through like the cap cut stuff or like trends, or the Buffalo Bills, who done a great job of like putting together one of the most random TikTok accounts in any team, in any league, to where it's anything from a super fried gamer type edit for a win to like, I'm going to turn Josh Allen into the guy from Parks and Rec and have him do a skit. Like it's all this crazy stuff that you would have never seen 5-6 years ago. But because the platform is so powerful and is making teams, leagues, everyone money, there's much more flexibility and participation from not just athletes and owners and whoever, but just a common man and woman to do it.
Especially in sports, you see those, reels or TikToks where they're asking the players the most random questions, like for example, I was at USC men's basketball game yesterday, and they have during timeout called Girl Quiz, and they'll have these short videos of asking the guys like, what's concealer? What does it mean when a girl says I'm fine? And all the guys are like, she's not fine. She's not fine. They're like, and everybody's watching that more than they're watching a game. Like it's just these super quick, hilarious videos. You come for that, and then you stay for the story of the sport.
100%. I think the funny one right now is the I'm just a chill guy trend, where it's like the little bear with his hands in a pocket. And it's just like, I'm just a chill guy with an update on me and my girl, man. Like, it's that kind of stuff that's super funny. Or it's the, there's always the one that's like the couple based, right? Where it's like, what is it, like women and male fields, or like men and women fields, or whatever it is. And it's like those that are so funny. Because then the best part is always the comments. Because then it's like someone who has like a subsection of that exact one, and you're just in that thing forever, just laughing. And it's just like that's just like funny sense of community. I think I laughed today because the men's one came out, and all the comments were like, "Oh, the men are getting sassy today." Like it was like that mindset that I thought was so funny. But like, I literally went to my team today. I was like, "Yo, I don't want to copy this because there's nothing from a team side we can do, but it would be great to send this to like 3 athletes and tell them to participate in this." Because if they can then get as a part of it, and that like, takes them somewhere, then all of a sudden they're like, yo, what are you doing in this trend? Like, what are you talking about? It's like that kind of stuff. So
yeah,
it's a great platform. It's fun. It's quick. You don't need to overthink it. I think sometimes we're just natural overthinkers, and everyone who overthinks it struggles with it.
Yeah, kind of just the authenticity of people and not having the full production of these videos. They're just filming it, either in their bathroom or just, wherever they can set up a camera and a light, like, like get ready with me, that kind of thing, like just the most random things. But for you, looking ahead, obviously the Winter Olympics in 2026, how are you utilizing TikTok and your other platforms to build content so that you're ready when the Olympics come?
Yeah. So with the Olympics, like, and X Games, right, they're obviously both separate entities. But we have a lot of athlete crossover. So especially in the snow side, where like we have a ton of snow athletes who participate in these sports. And for us, it's, again, how are we helping these athletes build their brand, their names, their, personas, whatever you want to call it, to then when the Olympics come, we have taught them enough to where like we will do whatever we can to amplify them. But we also understand that the Olympics come every 4 years in those prospective sports. How are you then amplifying those? How are you then amplifying that moment to totally catapult your career? I look at the rugby player Ella Meyer, who just blew up this last Olympics. But
that's probably the Bachelorette.
She first of all, she absolutely should, because it would be incredible, and it would do numbers, and it would do absolute numbers.
Oh yeah.
But she is the example I use every single time because her agent is actually, I don't know if she's still here, but she was based in Chicago. And I remember they went in there and she was telling like, yo, she's been grinding on social this last year. And all we had a conversation was like, all she got to do it at the right time. Cause it's that very old adage of like preparation meets luck and timing. And like, she was prepping for a year, gets into the village, starts showcasing everything in the village you can showcase, from the bag to the bed to what you can eat to, hey, meet this. Hey, I'm chasing Simone down for a pin to, what's my run out for if I was a bachelorette type thing, to like all of these things, to where she took fully and then performed. That's the other part, is then you went out there and performed, win the bronze medal. Boom, her team, and help with her team, and shout out to the Range Sports who did this. They immediately got her on TV, got her in press interviews, got her partnerships with 1,000 people. And she was working with Dove. I just saw she went out to do, she was, I don't know if it was here, the New York Marathon, and was like the, like hype coach for Brooks Running and like all these things. She just did it with, a makeup company as well. Like she has balled out so hard, but it was all because in that one window, 3-week window, she took full advantage of everything and anything she could while also performing. And like that case study is the case study that any and all individual team athletes should be doing, right? Because I use it's the same thing I used for JaVale McGee when the Lakers were in the bubble. I said, hey brother, you have the only camera in there outside of the league. We need to make YouTube vlogs. And every one of those things crossed 1 million in a day. Every single one. And from there, he got a ton of brand deals. So it's, you prepped for months learning how to do content. This is when you have to do it, right? This is our Super Bowl right now. This is our NBA finals. This is our Olympics. Showcase it from your experience and then also perform. And then the Lakers win. He goes off. Now all of a sudden he has all his money and he's doing his stuff. For her, she is the latest example of how to do it in the TikTok world. So now everyone going into 2026, especially on our side, is like, all right, we know that is a massive cultural moment. So then going into that with our athletes, how do we then do that? But also when they're in that cultural moment, and this is the biggest and most important thing for us, is how are they coming through and showcasing how and where X Games got them to this point? Whether it's a shout out interview, whether it's, we send them a care package, whether it's we go out and cover them, whatever it may be, it's something where like, we know this is a big deal for you and we want to be here for you. We're not going to try to compete with the Olympics in this capacity. But what we're going to do is be here for you as an athlete and as a supporter. And how do we then amplify your stuff from what we do? So anywhere in as we prepare for 2026, we're already talking with a lot of our athletes who we know for sure are going, and are putting together like a year-long plan of like, how are we supporting you, right? Like Aspen's coming up. That at some point it's going to be summer. People ain't going to be skiing or snowboarding. So how in the world are we going to talk about you in April, May, and June? Well, shoot, let's talk about training for this. And these other things. We're also partnered with US Ski and Snowboard, the organization. So like a lot of their athletes, obviously are X Games athletes. So when they're doing stuff and events, and we're going out to Copper Mountain in end of December to do an event with them, but like how we support our athletes at that event. And then moving forward when they go to other events. So it's again showing up where they are, to showcase it's not just us saying, hey, please come to the X Games. Like, no, we're going to come to you too, and show you love wherever you're at. Because I mean, we feel the same way. So that's kind of our plan right now. So it's been working so far. So the goal is to keep it going and see how it sticks.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're not just telling people, oh, come, you'll have a great time. You kind of have to show them beforehand.
Exactly. You have to, because, with anything, right? Like you can't get them to the Olympics and just all of a sudden be like, oh, good. You're here. Like, congrats. Like then something else has to happen to make it happen. But like, I need to prep this, whether it's like the example again with her is like working with a TikTok rep to say like, hey, look, here's one of the TikTok athletes you can work with for Team USA who's very active on this platform. Or like Snap, this is who's very active on this platform. At YouTube, we work with these guys and gals who then create YouTube vlogs really well, or shorts, or whatever it may be. You should work with them or amplify their stuff in a way. And then give them the case study why. Because a lot of times too, these platforms want to partner with athletes or like showcase these athletes who are actually doing it. if I have to then entice you to go out there and say like, hey, XYZ skateboarder, I need you to do IG stories everywhere you go. But if I have to kind of like poke and prod you, then they're going to see that versus like, dude, I was doing this anyway. I'm doing this anyway. Like that helps me out a ton because now I get their support. And then like, all right, well, now Instagram's going to pay a little more attention to you and like potentially help you kind of push that stuff out because now you're a window into these games more so than someone we have to kind of force to be a window.
Well, Devin, I mean, a lot to digest, but I think it's so important, not just for people who want to go into sports, but you said this earlier, it's sports, it's pop culture, it's all current events, it's all relevant, you know? So I appreciate you coming on SBC and just sharing that, you know, not only your own experience, but where this whole thing is going. You know, it seems like every industry is somehow intertwined with social media because ultimately that's the people's voice, you know, they're expressing what they want to see, what they want to hear, you know, via TikTok and other platforms. So thank you.
Of course. Social media at the end of the day is a way to have connection and community. So if there's a way for us to do that from my brand side, personal side, you know, whether it's us on this call or, you know, an athlete to a fan, like at the end of the day, it's to form a connection. So that's always my goal. And again, if we can do entertainment at the same point, it's a win-win for all of us. So as always, shout out to you. Shout out to SBC family. Thank you, everybody, for having your boy. And, you know, it's all love anytime, anywhere you guys need me.
Thank you for tuning in to our VSL Talent Alumni Series featuring VSL alum Devin Dismang. We hope you enjoyed learning about his journey into the sports industry and gained valuable insights into digital strategy and content creation. Like, subscribe, and leave a review on social media and tag us on your Instagram story at Sports Business Classroom. This episode is also brought to you by Hall Pass Media, a full-service marketing agency that specializes in brand consulting, event management, digital marketing, and creative design. For more information on Hall Pass Media, go to hallpassnetwork.com. See you next time.